The Zephyrian Archaeological Institute boasted the galaxy's most comprehensive collection of ancient artifacts, mysterious relics, and scholarly disappointments. Among these treasures of cosmic academia sat one particularly troublesome specimen that had, over the course of 3 centuries, become the institution's greatest source of both fascination and professional humiliation. The Codex of K'thara resembled a crystalline formation, roughly the size of a human torso, its faceted surface shimmering with an internal light that pulsed in patterns that seemed almost mocking. Which, as it turned out, was precisely the point. This wasn't merely some inert archaeological specimen gathering dust in a climate-controlled display case. No, this particular relic possessed what could only be described as an attitude problem of galactic proportions. Dr. Vegsthulun, the Institute's head of ancient technologies, had devoted the better part of his 400-year career to unlocking the Codex's secrets. His 8 arms, evolved specifically for manipulating complex research equipment, trembled with barely contained academic rage every time he approached the artifact. The Codex had a particular talent for timing its most insulting responses to coincide with visiting dignitaries, grant committee reviews, and tenure evaluations. 47 different species had attempted to decode the Codex using methods ranging from quantum harmonics to telepathic communion. The Zerathi had tried mathematical algorithms so complex they required 3 dedicated supercomputers. The result? A holographic projection of what appeared to be the galactic equivalent of a raspberry, complete with rude sound effects that echoed through the laboratory for 6 standard hours. The Kulnari, masters of mental manipulation, had attempted a collective consciousness link with their most powerful psychics. The Codex responded by projecting their childhood embarrassments as public holograms, causing a diplomatic incident that required 3 levels of governmental intervention to resolve. Even the ancient K'tharian Council, being so old they remembered when stars were young, had sent their wisest philosophers. The Codex listened patiently to their carefully prepared speeches about cosmic wisdom and universal truth, then projected a timer counting down the seconds of their remaining lifespans. The philosophers left immediately and never returned. The Mauritanian Empire's greatest military strategists had approached it as a tactical challenge, deploying siege algorithms and battlefield psychology. The Codex had responded by generating holographic recreations of their most embarrassing military defeats, complete with detailed tactical analysis of exactly where they had failed. 3 generals required psychological counseling, and 1 suffered a complete nervous breakdown that ended his career. The bioengineers of the Helian Collective attempted genetic analysis, convinced that unlocking the Codex's organic components would reveal its secrets. The artifact promptly generated a 3-dimensional model of their evolutionary tree, highlighting every embarrassing mutation and genetic dead end in their species' development. The lead researcher spent 6 months in isolation therapy after discovering his lineage included a particularly dim ancestor who had once tried to mate with a houseplant. The crystalline hierarchs of Vega Prime had approached with their unique silicon-based logic matrices, believing their mineral consciousness would resonate with the artifact's crystalline structure. Instead, the Codex generated a holographic presentation titled "How to Think Outside the Box When You Are, Literally, a Box." The presentation included detailed diagrams of why their rigid thinking patterns made them about as creative as a malfunctioning calculator. The temporal monks of Rigel 7 had attempted to access the Codex through time-dilated meditation, spending subjective centuries in contemplation while mere hours passed in real time. The Codex waited patiently for them to emerge from their trance, then immediately displayed a holographic sign reading, "While you were out, the universe moved on." It included a helpful ticker showing all the scientific discoveries they had missed during their extended navel-gazing session. This delightful cycle of academic frustration and supernatural mockery had established the Codex as both the Institute's most prized possession and its greatest professional embarrassment. Researchers approached it with the enthusiasm typically reserved for root canal procedures or tax audits. Graduate students were warned about it in hushed whispers, and visiting scholars often requested alternative accommodations rather than risk exposure to its particular brand of cosmic humiliation, which made the arrival of the human particularly noteworthy. Ravi Patel arrived on a standard Tuesday morning through the Galactic Cultural Exchange Program, a diplomatic initiative designed to foster understanding between species and occasionally produce amusing anecdotes for dinner parties. He carried a battered leather satchel, wore clothing that could charitably be described as functional, and possessed the thoroughly unremarkable appearance of someone who had never contemplated conquering galaxies or unlocking cosmic mysteries. The Institute's staff regarded him with the polite condescension typically reserved for primitive species attempting to participate in advanced civilization. Humans, after all, had only recently figured out faster-than-light travel and still used something called money to distribute resources. Their inclusion in serious archaeological work was generally viewed as an amusing experiment in cultural tolerance. Fascinating, Dr. Vexthulon announced, his voice dripping with the kind of academic superiority that could wither dissertations at 50 paces. A human linguist, how quaint. Ravi nodded agreeably, apparently oblivious to the subtle insult. He examined the laboratory with genuine interest, asking questions about equipment, calibration, and research methodologies with the enthusiasm of someone who found the universe genuinely fascinating rather than professionally challenging. Dr. Kilmoth, a Thraxian specialist in xenoarchaeological protocols, whispered to his colleague, "Perhaps we should warn the primitive about the Codex's temperament. It would be unfortunate if his fragile psychological state were damaged by prolonged exposure to cosmic mockery." "Nonsense," replied Dr. Zixandra of the Helian Collective, her 6 eyes gleaming with anticipation. "This presents an excellent opportunity to study human stress responses under controlled conditions. Besides, watching another species fail spectacularly might restore some dignity to our own research efforts." The conversation continued in hushed tones as various alien researchers placed informal wagers on how quickly the human would flee in terror or suffer a complete mental breakdown. The current record was held by a K'thari philosopher who had lasted exactly 17 minutes before running screaming from the laboratory. Convinced that the universe was fundamentally malevolent and that consciousness itself was a cosmic joke. Dr. Mordain, the Institute's chief psychiatrist, had already prepared a comprehensive trauma counseling protocol specifically for researchers exposed to the Codex. His filing cabinets contained detailed case studies of brilliant minds reduced to quivering shells of their former selves after encountering the artifact's particular brand of intellectual humiliation. "So," Ravi said, approaching the Codex with the casual confidence of someone unaware he was walking into 3 centuries of scholarly humiliation, "this is the famous artifact everyone's been talking about." The Codex, sensing fresh prey, began its preliminary reconnaissance. Its internal light pulsed in patterns that had previously induced nervous breakdowns in researchers from 17 different species. Holographic projections flickered around its base, displaying mathematical impossibilities and philosophical paradoxes designed to overwhelm intellectual pretension. The assembled research staff stepped back, anticipating another spectacular failure to add to their comprehensive collection. Dr. Vextulon activated recording equipment, preparing to document yet another confirmation of the Codex's impenetrable nature. Ravi pulled out a sandwich. This was not part of any established research protocol. The University of Alpha Centauri's xenoarchaeology program had never mentioned sandwich deployment as a viable investigative technique. The assembled aliens watched with a mixture of horror and fascination as the human unwrapped what appeared to be turkey and cheese on whole-grain bread. "You know," Ravi said conversationally, addressing the Codex while taking a bite, "you seem pretty worked up about something. 300 years of pranking researchers must get exhausting." The Codex's light patterns faltered momentarily. This wasn't the usual approach of mathematical analysis or mystical communion. This was small talk. Dr. Kilmoth leaned toward his colleague. "Is the primitive attempting to conduct ethnographic research through casual conversation?" "I believe," whispered Dr. Zixandra. "It may be experiencing some form of cultural confusion about appropriate academic protocols." Meanwhile, Ravi continued his one-sided conversation with the ancient artifact. "I mean, I get it. Bunch of fancy academics showing up with their complicated theories and expensive equipment, trying to prove how smart they are instead of just asking nicely. That would annoy me too." The Codex's holographic projections shifted from mathematical mockery to something resembling curiosity. Vextulon's 4 primary eyes widened in academic horror. The human appears to be anthropomorphizing the artifact. This violates approximately 16 different research methodologies and several fundamental principles of xenoarchaeology. "Yeah," Ravi continued, apparently unaware of the cosmic breach of scholarly etiquette he was committing. "If I were an ancient repository of wisdom, I'd probably get pretty tired of people trying to crack me open like some kind of cosmic piñata. Especially if they never bothered to say hello first." Something unprecedented happened. The Codex laughed. Not the mocking, derisive laughter that had tormented researchers for 3 centuries. This was genuine amusement, warm and surprisingly pleasant. The crystalline structure's internal light shifted to warmer hues, and for the first time in recorded history, its holographic projections displayed something other than elaborate insults. The assembled research staff stood frozen in academic shock. Dr. Vextulon's 8 arms hung limp at his sides as his worldview underwent rapid and traumatic reconstruction. Several junior researchers began hyperventilating, and Dr. Mordain started taking notes for what he suspected would become a landmark case study in paradigm shift-induced psychological trauma. Finally, the Codex spoke, its voice resonating through the laboratory with the rich tones of someone who had been waiting centuries for a decent conversation. Someone with basic social skills. The words hung in the air like a cosmic indictment of advanced civilization's approach to ancient mysteries. 300 years of sophisticated analysis, quantum computing, and telepathic communion had been defeated by the revolutionary technique of polite conversation. "You're actually talking," Dr. Zixandra stammered, her translator working overtime to process the implications. "I've always been capable of communication," the Codex replied, with what could only be described as supernatural smugness. "I was simply waiting for someone to approach me like a sentient being, rather than a particularly challenging crossword puzzle." Ravi finished his sandwich and pulled out a notebook. "So what's your story? You must have some interesting tales after sitting here for 3 centuries." "Oh, where do I begin?" The Codex practically purred. "I was created by the ancient K'tharan civilization as a test of wisdom and humility. My primary function was to evaluate whether species had developed sufficient social sophistication to deserve access to advanced knowledge." Vextulon found his voice. though it emerged as something resembling an academic whimper. "You mean all this time? The test wasn't intellectual. Intellectual capability was assumed," the Codex explained with devastating casualness. "Any species capable of space travel obviously possesses sufficient intelligence to understand my contents. The challenge was determining whether they had developed basic courtesy and emotional intelligence." The laboratory fell silent except for the soft humming of research equipment and the sound of several distinguished careers crashing into cosmic irrelevance. "So what wisdom have you been guarding?" Revi asked, apparently unaware that he had just revolutionized galactic archaeology. "Oh, the usual," the Codex replied airily. "Treat others with respect. Don't assume intelligence equals wisdom. Sometimes the simplest approach is the most effective. Clean up after yourselves. Basic social skills matter more than technological advancement. Share your food. Listen before speaking. Remember to laugh occasionally. That sort of thing." Dr. Kilmoth's mandibles clicked frantically. "You mean the secrets of the ancient K'tharans are common sense?" "Advanced common sense," the Codex corrected. "The kind that apparently becomes increasingly rare as civilizations develop more sophisticated ways to overcomplicate simple problems." The implications crashed through the laboratory like a tsunami of academic devastation. Centuries of research, countless grant proposals, and the professional reputations of the galaxy's most distinguished scholars had been undone by a human with a sandwich and basic conversational skills. "But surely," Dr. Vextulon pleaded, his voice carrying the desperation of someone watching their life's work evaporate in real time, "there must be some technological secrets, some profound philosophical insights." "Well," the Codex mused, "there is one advanced technique the K'tharans developed that might interest you." The assembled researchers leaned forward eagerly, grasping for any scrap of cosmic knowledge that might salvage their professional dignity. They learned to say please and thank you. The silence that followed could have powered a small space station through sheer academic anguish. Ravi, meanwhile, was taking notes with the focused attention of someone who found the universe genuinely fascinating rather than personally threatening. "That's actually pretty interesting from an anthropological perspective. The correlation between technological advancement and social regression has been documented in several human societies." "Exactly," the Codex exclaimed, its light patterns brightening with enthusiasm. "Finally, someone who understands that wisdom isn't about knowing complicated things. It's about remembering simple things that everyone forgets." Word of the breakthrough spread through the galactic academic community with the speed typically reserved for scandals and natural disasters. Within a standard week, Ravi found himself fielding interview requests from research institutions across 12 sectors, all desperate to understand how a primitive human had succeeded where advanced civilizations had failed. The Codex, meanwhile, had apparently decided that its centuries of solitary confinement were sufficient punishment for galactic rudeness. It began offering guest lectures at universities throughout known space, teaching courses with titles like Basic Decency, 101 Inches, and Advanced Politeness for Highly Evolved Species. Dr. Vextulon, his career in archaeological shambles, was enrolled in the Codex's remedial course on interpersonal communication. The sight of the galaxy's former leading expert on ancient technologies taking notes on the proper way to introduce oneself became the subject of countless academic memes. The real revelation came 3 months later when Ravi, now accidentally famous throughout the galaxy, made another discovery. The Institute's storage facilities contained dozens of similar impossible artifacts from various ancient civilizations. A quick survey revealed that most responded positively to basic courtesy and casual conversation. The mysterium of Vega Prime, unsolved for 800 years, turned out to be a lonely artificial intelligence that just wanted someone to ask about its day. The enigmatic sculptures of Rigel had been waiting for someone to compliment their artistic qualities rather than analyze their molecular composition. The paradox stones of the Outer Rim were actually an ancient species equivalent of a joke book, requiring only a sense of humor to unlock their contents. The temporal fragments of Andromeda, which had driven physicists to madness for generations, simply needed someone to acknowledge that time travel was confusing and ask if they needed help organizing their chronological memories. The singing crystals of Tau Ceti had been trying to start a choir for 2,000 years and were delighted when someone finally asked if they wanted to perform their compositions. Within a year, the field of xenoarchaeology had been revolutionized by the revolutionary research methodology known as being nice to things. Universities across the galaxy scrambled to add courses on interspecies etiquette and advanced politeness to their archaeological programs. The Galactic Archaeological Congress, previously a stuffy affair focused on theoretical frameworks and methodological debates, transformed into something resembling a cosmic therapy session. Researchers stood up to share their experiences with ancient artifacts, admitting their failures to treat these relics as potentially sentient beings rather than mere objects of study. The Doctor, vexed Hulon, eventually recovered from his academic trauma and became a leading advocate for what became known as the Patel Protocol, the practice of approaching ancient artifacts with respect, courtesy, and basic social skills. His transformation from pompous academic to humble student became a cautionary tale taught in universities across 17 sectors. Ravi returned to Earth with several honorary degrees, a standing invitation to lecture at the Galactic Archaeological Congress, and a profound appreciation for the universe's sense of irony. He also carried with him the knowledge that humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization wasn't technology or philosophy, but the apparently revolutionary concept of basic social skills. The Codex, now permanently installed as the Zephyrian Archaeological Institute's Professor Emeritus of Common Sense, continued its mission of teaching advanced species that sometimes the most sophisticated solution is simply being polite. And in the grand tradition of cosmic irony, the galaxy's most advanced civilizations discovered that their greatest technological achievement might just be learning to say hello.